Every Sunday morning, without fail, Nancy Guthrie was at church. Her friends could set their watches by it. She was 84 years old. She moved slowly these days, but she showed up. So on the morning of Sunday, February 1st, 2026, when the service began in Tucson, Arizona, and Nancy's seat was empty, the people who knew her understood immediately that something was wrong. Nancy Guthrie did not miss church, and Nancy Guthrie was not the kind of woman who simply disappeared. But that is exactly what had happened. Sometime in the dark hours of that night, someone came to her front door, and by morning, she was gone. Before we talk about that night, you should know who Nancy Guthrie is. She was born Nancy Ellen Long in 1942 in Fort Wright, Kentucky, a small town just across the river from Cincinnati. Her daughter Savannah once described her on national television as a consistent doer of the right thing and the hard thing. And if the name Savannah Guthrie sounds familiar, it should. She has been a co-anchor of NBC's Today Show since 2012, one of the most recognizable faces on American morning television. Savannah grew up in Tucson and went to the University of Arizona, and her mother stayed in that community for decades. Nancy raised 3 children there: Annie, a poet; Cameron, a retired military colonel; and Savannah. By early 2026, Nancy was living alone in a quiet, comfortable neighborhood in the Catalina Foothills, just north of Tucson, near East Skyline Drive and North Campbell Avenue. Neighbors knew her from her walks. One of them, a man named Jeff who lived 4 houses down, later said she was simply a pleasant, wonderful neighbor. She had some physical ailments that limited how she got around, and according to the sheriff, she could not have left her home without help. She took daily medication. She had a pacemaker. But her mind, everyone agreed, was perfectly sharp. Now, the night of Saturday, January 31st, 2026. That evening, Nancy's children were with her. According to the Pima County Sheriff's Department, she was dropped off at her home and was last seen alive and well at around 9:30 that night. Her family said goodbye. The door closed, and as far as anyone knew, an ordinary weekend was ending in an ordinary way. What happened over the next few hours is the reason this case has gripped the entire country. At some point during the night, Nancy's home security system stopped working. Investigators later said it had been disabled. Think about that for a moment, because it matters. This was not a wandering situation. This was not a fall, or a medical emergency, or a confused elderly woman walking out into the desert. Someone switched off the protection around an 84-year-old woman while she slept. And there was a witness. Not a person, a camera. Nancy had a Google Nest doorbell at her front door, and in the early morning hours of February 1st, it recorded something that investigators would not release for days, and that the public has now watched millions of times. A man, walking up to Nancy Guthrie's front door in the dark. He was wearing a face mask. He was wearing gloves. On his back was a stuffed black backpack. The FBI later identified it as an Ozark Trail hiker pack, the kind sold at any Walmart in America. And at his side, according to authorities, he appeared to be carrying a holstered gun. The FBI described him as a man of average build, about 5'9" or 5'10". That is all we can say about him, because his face is completely covered. Stay with me here, because what investigators found when they finally got inside that house is even more disturbing. Sunday morning came. Church started. Nancy wasn't there. A relative went to check on her, and around noon, a 911 call was placed. Nancy Guthrie was gone. Her medication was still there, medication she needed every single day. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at the house, and what started as a welfare check turned very quickly into something much bigger. Helicopters went up over the Catalina Foothills. Search and rescue volunteers, the same crews that pull lost hikers off the mountains, walked the neighborhood in grids. And in a move that Sheriff Chris Nanos admitted was not standard for a missing person case, homicide detectives were sent into the home. "I don't need to tell you this is very concerning to us," Nanos told reporters. "We don't typically get the sheriff out on a scene like this." He said there was grave concern for her well-being, and he put it plainly. She's 84. She needs her meds. Her family needs her too. Inside and around that house, investigators reportedly found things that turned this from a search into a criminal investigation. drops of blood on the front steps, DNA inside the home belonging to an unknown individual. And one detail that still hasn't been fully explained: the doorbell camera itself, the one that recorded the masked man, was gone, removed from the scene. The footage only survived because Google was able to recover it from their servers, even though, remarkably, Nancy didn't have an active subscription. Her pacemaker gave investigators one more clue. At a certain point that night, it lost its connection to her smartphone, and that moment reportedly helped them build a timeline of when Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home. Within days, the FBI had joined the case. Tips began pouring in by the thousands. The sheriff called it a possible abduction, and the family, who were quickly cleared of any involvement, began to pray. And then, less than a week after Nancy vanished, letters started arriving. Letters that claimed to be from the kidnapper. Letters demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin. What those letters said, and the shocking truth about who really sent them, that's where this story takes a turn nobody saw coming. When we left off, Nancy Guthrie had been missing for less than a week, and letters claiming to be from her kidnapper had started to arrive. The first note demanded money. According to multiple reports, it sought millions of dollars in ransom, to be paid in Bitcoin, untraceable digital currency. Now, put yourself in that family's position. Your 84-year-old mother is gone. A masked man with a gun was recorded at her door, and then a letter arrived saying, in effect, "We have her, and this is the price." The Guthrie family did not hesitate. Shortly after receiving the messages, Savannah and her siblings recorded a video and posted it publicly, speaking directly to whoever had taken their mother. "We received your message, and we understand," Savannah said. "We beg you now to return our mother to us." She added that the family would pay. Her brother Cameron, a retired military colonel, made his own appeal on camera. "Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you." These were not press statements written by lawyers. This was a family pleading into a camera lens, hoping the right person was watching. But then came a second letter, and this one was different. It was reportedly mailed on February 6th, just days after Nancy vanished, and sent to media outlets. The public didn't learn what it actually said until June, when NBC News reported the contents. The note claimed that Nancy Guthrie had died shortly after she was taken. According to people familiar with the letter, it did not demand any money. It described her death as unintentional. Law enforcement sources told a Tucson television station that the two notes were believed to have come from the same person. They reportedly came from different IP addresses, but the sender appeared to have used the same type of secure server to hide their tracks. When that report aired on the Today Show in June, Savannah Guthrie sat at the same anchor desk she has occupied for over a decade and delivered a tearful plea for information. "We cannot be at peace," she said. Here's the thing, though. Investigators never verified that either letter actually came from whoever took Nancy. And you'll want to remember that because we're coming back to those letters before this part is over. While the family waited, the investigation became one of the largest this part of Arizona has ever seen. By day 21, Sheriff Chris Nanos said the tip count had reached roughly 40,000. Think about that number. Detectives working through 40,000 leads, where by one official's estimate, only about 1 in 10 had any real value. The FBI released the doorbell images and asked the entire country to study the man in the mask. Average build, 5'9" or 5'10", black Ozark Trail backpack. NewsNation reported that federal agents visited local gun stores carrying a list of 40 names and 40 photographs, asking clerks if any of those men had come through their doors. Investigators questioned work crews at a construction site where debris gets compacted into the ground in grids. The kind of place, one expert explained, that becomes an absolute nightmare to search. And then there was the physical evidence. About 2 miles from Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills, searchers found a pair of black gloves. On those gloves, DNA from an unknown male. For a moment, it looked like the break everyone had prayed for. The sample was run through CODIS, the national DNA database of known offenders. No match. Investigators reportedly turned next to investigative genetic genealogy, the same technique that has cracked decades-old cold cases by tracing DNA through family trees. As of this recording, no name has come from it. or at least none that has been made public. There were false alarms, too. A man was detained in Rio Rico, a community about an hour south of Tucson near the border. His attorney later spoke publicly about how his client ended up on investigators' radar at all. No charges in Nancy's disappearance ever came from it. Meanwhile, on the Monday that opened Week 3, the sheriff announced that Nancy's children and their spouses had been formally cleared of any involvement. To suggest anything otherwise, his office said, is wrong and cruel. Savannah returned to the cameras with a simple message: it is never too late to do the right thing. And her family repeated the words they have held on to from the beginning: we still have hope, we still believe. Stay with me now, because this is where those ransom letters come back, and the story takes a turn that almost nobody saw coming. On July 2, 2026, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Arizona made an announcement. A 42-year-old man from Los Angeles named Derek Colella pleaded guilty to 2 federal counts of harassment using a telecommunications device for sending fake ransom notes in the Nancy Guthrie case. Fake. According to reporting on the plea, claims emerged that none of the ransom notes sent in this case were genuine at all. He faces up to 2 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. Now sit with what that means for this family. They stood in front of cameras and begged. They said they would pay. They grieved over a letter that told them their mother was dead, and at least some of what tormented them, prosecutors say, was a cruel hoax sent by a stranger 2 states away. But if the letters were fake, then the hardest truth remains. More than 5 months in, there is still no ransom, no suspect, and no Nancy. And increasingly, the questions have turned away from the masked man on the porch and toward the people running the search itself. The unpreserved tracks in the front yard, the missing camera, and a sheriff with a past that once you hear it, you will not forget. The ransom letters were fake. The masked man is still unidentified. And that leaves us with the investigation itself. Because from the very first days, people who study cases like this began pointing at things that went wrong. Start in Nancy Guthrie's front yard. In the days after she vanished, cameras captured something odd in the ground out front. 2 parallel ridges, running in a straight line. Ruts, pressed into the earth. Joseph Scott Morgan, a forensics professor at Jacksonville State University, who has worked over 10,000 death scenes, looked at those images on national television and explained what they could mean. 2 parallel lines, evenly spaced, staying straight, not curving. Investigators measure the distance between marks like that, the wheelbase, to figure out what made them. And in his words, one possibility that fits is something like a wheelchair. Remember, Nancy Guthrie had limited mobility. She could not have left that house on her own, so those ruts might show exactly how she left. Here's the problem. The ground there is uneven, full of rock, terrible for making a plaster cast, and it has been reported that the FBI may have failed to preserve those impressions at all. Morgan raised a second concern, and it's a hard one to hear. Because the scene wasn't tightly secured early on, nobody can say for certain whether those marks were left by a perpetrator or by someone else entirely after the fact. Then there are the cameras. The doorbell camera that recorded the masked man was taken from the scene. Investigators have never explained by whom, though the obvious suspicion is that the intruder removed it himself. The footage only exists because Google recovered it from their servers. But Sheriff Chris Nanos admitted in an interview that when investigators asked about Nancy's other cameras, they hit a wall. There was no paid subscription, and without one, the video overwrites itself. Every 24 hours, maybe 72. Whatever those cameras saw that night may simply be gone. Digital investigators have also pointed out that the metadata behind the released images, the hidden data showing exactly when and where video was recorded, has never been made public. And one more unanswered question sits at the center of all of it. How did the intruder get in? There has been no report of a broken window or a kicked-in door. The security system was disabled. On Crime Stories, Nancy Grace spent a full segment asking whether a lockpick, or even a lockpick gun, was used to open Nancy Guthrie's door, quietly, in the dark, like someone who had done it before. And then there is the sheriff himself. Chris Nanos is the man in charge of this case, and his history matters, so let's lay it out carefully, from the public record. Nanos was first appointed Pima County Sheriff in 2015. Soon after, the FBI opened an investigation into the department's misuse of federal RICO funds, money seized from criminal organizations that is supposed to go toward fighting crime. According to the Arizona Daily Star, investigators found money had been diverted for years, including to help pay for an annual December ball, with dinners and tuxedo rentals. In 2016, his second-in-command, Chief Deputy Chris Radke, was indicted on federal felony charges and resigned the same day. Radke later pleaded guilty to 3 misdemeanor counts of theft of federal funds and received probation, no prison time, an outcome that reportedly outraged deputies in his own department. Nanos lost his election that November, largely because of the scandal. Now, to be completely fair, Nanos himself was never charged with any crime. The state attorney general later reviewed the case and found no new evidence of corruption, but his successor publicly said the report placed some responsibility on the former sheriffs, Nanos included, and years later, Pima County voters put Nanos back in office. So when this same man stands at a podium and says he has an idea of the motive in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance but will not share it publicly, you can understand why some people trust him completely and some people don't trust him at all. If an arrest ever comes, a defense attorney will know that history by heart. Stay with me, because all of this leads to the question in the title of this video, the one question nobody can answer. It is not just where is Nancy Guthrie, though nobody can answer that either. It's this: why her? Think about what we know. The ransom notes were a hoax, so this was not a kidnapping for money, or if it was, the kidnapper never actually asked for any. Nothing has been reported stolen from the home. Nancy was an 84-year-old retired mother of 3, beloved by her neighbors, with no known enemies in the world. And yet someone disabled her security system, picked their way through her front door in the middle of the night, and took her. And in nearly 6 months, with 40,000 tips, the FBI, DNA, genetic genealogy, and half the country watching, investigators have not publicly named a single suspect or person of interest. The sheriff says he has an idea why. He won't say it. And until he does, or until an arrest is made, that question just hangs there. As of July 2026, Nancy Guthrie has not been found. On July 1st, Savannah Guthrie said in a statement that the past 5 months have been agony and unending trauma for her family, and that they have not stopped searching for their mother for a single moment. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe the man on that doorbell camera acted alone, or was someone else involved? Tell me in the comments, and if you know anything at all, the FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI, or you can stay anonymous at 520-882-7463. It only takes one tip. If you want to follow this case with us until Nancy Guthrie comes home, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the moment something breaks, we will cover it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.